let's discuss how our president is calling out American energy companies for being profitable and basically being, well, un-American. Yet President Biden is making his tour around the nation, particularly he did so right before the midterm elections, calling out U.S. energy companies for not spending more on drilling for oil and natural gas, for not growing supply, and basically for putting too much of its profits towards dividends and share buybacks. He says that puts profits before consumers. So let's break this down as to what is actually happening in the domestic energy industry these days. And constant listeners of the Far Middle, you're going to be familiar with many of these points because we discussed them before. So first, the Biden administration, it takes office, and what does it do? It immediately cancels or halts pipelines being built all across the nation. And it also brings leasing of oil and natural gas rights on public lands to a trickle of what it was. Then, the leadership of our nation decides to force energy and climate policies left and right everywhere you look down the throats of industry and the public. So you see these climate types of policies hidden or embedded within COVID relief bills. You see it within the Inflation Reduction Act. You see it in regulations from the administrative state. It's in global accords, of course, like the damaging Paris Climate Accord, and on it goes. All of these are designed to boost up weaker alternatives in the energy mix, like wind or solar, and push down the more competitive options like domestic natural gas and oil. Now, all this government intervention, what does it do? It drives down the supply of oil and natural gas, as designed from the get-go, which then drives up the cost of energy and stokes inflation. When these happen, our inept leaders, they do more of the same that caused it, is evidenced by the passage of the aforementioned Inflation Reduction Act. That makes them meaning constricted energy supply, high energy costs, and inflation, that makes them even worse. Now, while the fearless leaders and elites in places like Washington, D.C. are cooking up this dog's breakfast of a policy mess, energy companies are acting rationally because they operate in the real world. And that's a world where you are directly accountable for decisions that you make, and frankly, you're accountable for factors beyond your direct control. The real world dictates a few realities. First, investment in drilling and infrastructure, like pipelines, it's up. So domestic energy companies are doing what they can with more activity and investment to respond to the supply crunch and to cost increases. Second, domestic energy companies would love to drill more and build more pipes, but they can't because the projects won't be approved, the leases won't be granted, and there's no room to transport incremental production in the existing plumbing of our pipeline infrastructure. Again, as designed by those elite experts in places like D.C. with their policies and regulatory onslaught. So the president is calling for the very thing he made impossible by policy design. That's interestingly ironic even for a politician. And then third, when you are a business and you have maxed out how much you can invest into the asset base or the activity level of drilling and construction, then your next best alternative is still a good one, which is to return those profits that are left to your owners, in other words, to your shareholders. That's who you work for, and that's who owns the business or the company. And by the way, shareholders are typically, directly or indirectly, people like you and me, as in 401k owners, pensioners, retirees, and run-of-the-mill mom-and-pop investors, basically Main Street. You're returning profits to the true owners and countless investors as a responsible and American thing to do. So, what the heck, Mr. President? Do you understand the basics of business in the free market and private enterprise? Do you realize the impact of the policies and regulatory state you fed and turned loose on the American people? Do you see now you are the cause of the very problems you now complain about and finger others as the perpetrators? And do you see now why you are pleading with the Saudis and they laugh, why you try to bribe the Iranians and they rebuff, why you threaten the Russians and they invade, and why you court Venezuela and they insult? Your actions and policies, they're doing great damage to America and the world. Embrace the reality. Reverse these damaging energy and climate policies now, and then watch the doers in free market quickly right a ship that is severely listing and dead in the water.